So welcome to the people who've tuned in so far and to all those who are going to join us. Welcome to Manny's Super Civic Cyber Conversations, coming to you live from Jane Kim's living room and Manny Kutiel's balcony, trying to get some sun in. We're continuing our work to civically engage the population through this time. And we're going to talk about electing Bernie Sanders in California. With the woman who was in charge of California's political operation for Bernie Sanders and is now on the national political team, former supervisor of San Francisco, Jane Kim. Welcome, Jane.
Hi everyone.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to get a sense of, like, what are you doing now? Like, what is, like, as political director, on the national political team, like, with shelter in place, like, how has that hampered your work?
Yeah, no, it has really changed the campaign operation and how we've been operating. So after the March 3rd primary, the California team pretty much got deployed across the country to Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Arizona, Ohio, New York State. I got deployed to Washington, D.C. to join the national political team. And we had, literally 24 hours to make a decision and then a couple of days to kind of start packing up our stuff and moving.
Wow.
And most of us arrived around Sunday or Monday, and literally 4 days later, it became very clear that this was a serious crisis, that shelter in place was going to be incredibly important to flatten the curve. And we were all turned around and sent back home from everywhere that we
Damn. And I should just say, for folks, if you have questions for Jane about the campaign, about Senator Sanders, you can start typing them into the Q&A box. And you don't have to wait until we open for Q&A. We're just going to talk for 15, 20 minutes tops, and then we'll get to your questions. Also, folks who are tuning in, can you just raise your hands real quick? We'd love to see who's here and get some audience participation. There's a little hand raise button. Raise your hands. This is a grassroots conversation, so definitely raise your hand so we can see who's here. So Jane, can you explain to me what your job entailed as the California political director for Senator Bernie Sanders, and how long you did that particular job for?
So I was hired in the beginning of June as a team of, I think, roughly about 10 to 12 to start building the infrastructure and organization for the California team. I think that it's probably the earliest that any presidential campaign has landed in the state of California for any presidential cycle. And we were serious about running the type of campaign in California that usually only Iowans see. The senator decided to invest early in 5 states: Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and California. And our team just began the infrastructure of starting to build out, reaching out to our volunteer base. And actually here in the Bay Area, at least last summer, 2019, the greatest number of Bernie Sanders volunteers were right here in the Bay Area.
Wow.
So we were a very important part of the operation, not just for California, but for the entire country, both in 2016 and in 2020. And so over 8 months, we built a statewide campaign that honestly I have never seen for any office. It was incredibly exciting to be a part of. We had ended up with over 20 field offices in the state and 105 full-time employees.
Wow.
And we were door knocking in every district, in every precinct, in every county, and in ways that I think typically other early states are used to, but certainly not the state of California. And it was really exciting to run such an intimate ground campaign in a state as large as this.
What do you mean by intimate? What made it so intimate?
Because we broke California into 6 regions, and each region had their own director: Northern California, Bay Area, Central Valley, Central Coast, Orange County, Inland Empire, LA, and San Diego. And we ran as a collective, state, but we had 6 different operations and running multiple offices, multiple field teams. And so in many ways, the campaign felt more intimate because we were really going to door to door. And we also prioritized neighborhoods and communities that weren't used to seeing door knockers. So we went into communities where the vote is 1 out of 5. right? Campaigns usually try to focus on 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5s. And this is, we see your voting record.
Yeah.
And we see if you voted in 5 out of the 5 last elections. For example, I voted in 5 out of the 5 last elections.
No surprises there.
Right. Those are the voters that you want to get, they're going to vote. We were going out and hitting on voters that were 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5. We prioritized, of course, the Latinx community and all of our color youth voters that are just more difficult to get because we knew that those are Bernie Sanders supporters. What ultimately happened in the end is we ended up winning 50 out of 58 counties here in California.
Wow.
We won wealthier neighborhoods and lower income neighborhoods. We overwhelmingly won in the Latinx community, the Asian American community, and the youth community. And, we were very excited about the turnout that we had, and we ended up winning California.
I would love to hear like a story or two from what organizing for Bernie Sanders was like in Orange County. That must have been interesting.
We did really well in Orange County and Inland Empire. We won congressional districts. And at least on the day of, we won every single congressional district in Orange County and Inland Empire. Keep in mind, it's the primary, right? So we're competing for the votes of people that registered as Democrat or as decline to state, no party preference.
Yeah. So why do you think so obviously the organizer who helped run in California being top notch and being so aggressive and full, I'm sure was a big part of it. But looking back on Bernie's win in California, what do you think it was that translated into a win for Senator Sanders in such an important state?
One, we had been building an operation here for 8 months. I think that was incredibly important. Again, that is the treatment that normally states like Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada get to see, but California doesn't. We had the resources and the funding to run a very, very grassroots campaign that normally maybe district supervisors in San Francisco get to run, not necessarily statewide candidates. We had that capacity. Our field campaign is, I think, in the end of the day, why we won this state so commandingly.
Yeah.
And are focused on communities that weren't used to getting outreach. And I think in the news, you heard a lot about the Sanders strategy with the Latinx vote. We ended up winning 49% of the Latino vote compared to Biden, who won 19%. And Latino took up 31% of all eligible voters. We also won Asian American voters 2-1. Over Biden and Bloomberg, who did well with Asian Americans. They came in second and third.
So some tough questions. When you look back on Super Tuesday, like what do you think happened? Do you think that and Super Tuesday and then that other set of the other Tuesday, I guess a week after that, do you when you think back to all the other primary states, obviously California, Bernie Sanders' team did amazingly and won commandingly, but the kind of prevailing wisdom, conventional wisdom now is that he didn't do well enough in all the other states to give him the delegate lead that he needs to win. So what do you think happened? And also, do you agree with that prevailing wisdom, or what is the campaign saying, or kind of like what the status is now of the candidacy?
First of all, I want to just give a shout out to Sam Sukatan, who was our Orange County Inland Empire director. He joined us. And actually, it'd be great for him to share some of the information later when we open up for Q&A.
Yeah, Sam, feel free to type in some stuff, some stories. Yeah, we'll share them.
Yeah, I'm so glad that he joined us. I'm really speaking as an individual. I'm not speaking on behalf of the campaign.
Yes.
Conversation. What I saw is that when we were on the ground, we won. With the exception of South Carolina. When we were on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and California, we won. And we won voters that may not have typically voted for Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, every single member of the campaign was expected to go door knocking. No one was too good to go door knocking. So I went door knocking. All of our senior staff went door knocking, even if we weren't on the campaign.
Yeah.
And what I saw on the ground was that people just, they needed to have Bernie's platform explained to them, because the media wasn't doing it for us. People didn't understand what Medicare for All was. People didn't understand what it meant to be a democratic socialist. And there was a lot of assumptions about who Bernie was. The one thing that we didn't have to fight for, though, is that people did generally trust Bernie. They trusted that his intentions and what he said was who he was. There was no doubt about that. And the trust factor was already very high for Senator Sanders. But there were a lot of questions about his policy agenda. But when we were at the door and we were able to talk about it and explain it, people were like, oh yeah, I do think everyone should have health care regardless of whether they have a job or not, right? But sometimes you just need kind of an extra few words in that conversation to understand that actually his agenda was not something scary or something radical or something completely out there, but was actually very pragmatic. So one of my personal lessons, and I can't say that this is definitively what happened throughout the country, was that where we were on the ground, we won. We won, and we ran in some ways a very typical presidential campaign, at least one that has resources, in that we invested in organizing in the early states, right? Most of the campaigns invested in 4 of the early states. In fact, actually not that many were in California, but they did invest in the other 4 states. And then I think because it can be a monster to take on 50 states, in some ways you do start to depend on momentum.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that might be more difficult for a candidate like the senator, who is not like other Democratic candidates. He's not a cookie candidate. And people do need more of a conversation on why Bernie.
And so where do you think the campaign stands now? I know the kind of the word is, the official word of the campaign is they're waiting and seeing. They haven't made a decision yet. They'd like to debate the vice president again. How do you, speaking like with your campaign hat off, if you can, like what do you think is going to happen next? And also, like, how do you think everything that's been going on in the last couple of weeks affects the candidacy and his message?
Well, I do have to say that one thing I learned on a presidential race is that there is common sense, but things changed rapidly. From February to May to June to October to December to February. Whoever was on top one week would come crashing down, a month later, and we're no longer the lead. And you kept seeing candidates kind of cycle up and down. And so it's hard to predict what will happen moving forward. I will say this, the senator is genuinely hyper-focused on COVID-19 response and his job. As soon as the outbreak took some serious shape, he went back 100% to being a senator, fighting for the American people. And his agenda, he knows, matters even more urgently now than it ever did before. So having a Medicare for All system, having healthcare for every American, regardless of whether they have a job or not, has become exceedingly more important when 3 million people file for unemployment in 1 week. 3 million people. His agenda to make sure that we are investing in everyday Americans first and not a handout to corporate America billionaires is more urgent now than it ever was before. Literally on a day-to-day basis for people today, they don't know what they're going to do tomorrow. April 1st is going to be a big day for many Americans when bills come in. And with millions of Americans that no longer have income coming in, we have to really think about how has this country invested in our social infrastructure, and I mean education, healthcare, to physical things like our roads. These are the things that the senator has been fighting for, and in many ways, COVID-19 is an opportunity as well for us to demonstrate why this agenda matters so much for this country. And that's where the campaign has pivoted to. My job has predominantly been doing outreach to our community-based organizations, our elected leaders, on what's happening in your community and how can we help.
So that's awesome, and I'm glad to hear that the fire still burns. I think the question on a lot of people's minds who are just kind of sitting back and watching all this, maybe the folks who've already voted in the primary states, is once this is decided, how can we all kind of hold each other and get together to fight Donald Trump? And to me, it does seem like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders is like could not have more different constituencies in some ways. If you just look at kind of the differences in Latino voters on one side versus the other, if you look at the difference in African American voters, and of course young age, you know, you have a lot of young people who did not vote for Joe Biden, who are going to be affected most starkly by the policies of this president, and a lot of young people voting for Bernie Sanders. So it might be too early for the Sanders campaign to be thinking about how to bring their base in, but what do you think would be an appropriate strategy if Senator Sanders does not get the nomination, for him to bring in his very hefty constituency of folks who are excited about him to get behind Joe Biden, which, you know, might be hard for those folks to get excited about. You know, they might vote for him, but are they going to get out the vote? Are they going to go knock on doors? You know, how does that work? How is that going to happen if it needs to happen?
I think that we saw in either scenario, whether it was Vice President Biden or Senator Sanders as our nominee, that a lot of work would have to happen on both sides to bring supporters together. So even with Senator Sanders as the nominee, there was a lot of fear amongst certain Democratic leaders about what this meant for the Democratic.
Yes.
And so regardless of who the nominee is, we have a lot of work to do to bring folks together around a unified agenda to get this president, Donald Trump, out of the White House. And I think that the COVID-19 response has even more critically demonstrated why we need someone who is intelligent, thoughtful, and is not going to be changing his decisions or the information that he's disseminating literally on hour by hour basis. People are dying because we're not getting out the appropriate support, and we're not getting out the correct information to people. I don't know exactly what it's going to take, but I do genuinely feel that both Biden and Sanders are committed to making that happen. And what I will say is that I think they genuinely like each other. And I think it matters. Like, I think that there's a genuine relationship and friendship that exists between the two of them. And so I think that that is a little different from 2016. And the leadership is going to have to work to bring the parties together. But I will also mention that the leadership is going to have to absorb aspects of each other's agenda, like really convincingly, not just like, I hear you, young people, but like actually saying, I'm going to be the leader for the Green New Deal. Because I may be on this planet for 20 more years, but you have 80. And this is the first time that we're not sure how long this planet is, you know, how much farther this planet is going to make it. And that is so urgent for young people. And they don't feel that every elected is taking this issue seriously. And so what I hope to see from whoever is the nominee is more than just lip service, but actually convincingly and definitively taking on aspects of the agenda and saying, I'm going to lead on this, and I'm going to make sure that these people are going to be in leadership positions to implement it.
Thank you for that. So for the folks who are tuned in, can people raise their hands if they were a Bernie Sanders voter? Let's kind of do a little poll here. How many of the folks who are on the call are? So we have about 50 people, 51 people who are currently listening in. Just taking a look at how many folks were Bernie Sanders voters. A majority, at least, for sure. What would you say to those folks who voted for Bernie Sanders, who are on this call, might be listening afterwards? Thanks everyone that raised their hand. And they want to keep fighting for Senator Sanders. They want him to be the nominee. They're not listening to what the New York Times is saying. They're saying we believe in Senator Sanders' ability to win. What do you say to them? What is your advice to them on how to keep organizing for him, given that they can't leave their homes?
Right. Well, we still have half of the states remaining for the primary. And I do believe, again, when we connect with voters and when we talk to folks, that we can win. And in some ways, actually, I mean, we're seeing two responses on our Bernie dialer. So first of all, please get on the Bernie dialer and support us in phone
What's
banking.
the Bernie dialer?
It's on our website. You can go to berniesanders.com and join the Bernie dialer. You can select the states that you're interested in phone banking into. The next 3 states that are coming up are Alaska, Hawaii, and Wyoming, and then Wisconsin. And Alaska, Hawaii, and Wisconsin have moved largely into a vote by mail scenario. And by the way, on our calls, we tell people to do what they're comfortable. Of course, if they don't feel safe going out to vote in person, we don't push them to go out to vote, but we encourage them to get their vote by mail ballot and give them instructions on how to do it. And I can't tell you how many calls I've been on with, with voters from Arizona and other states, where even just the reminder or the explanation on how the process currently works actually got people to vote, that we're going to vote for Bernie Sanders already.
Before we get to questions, Jane, oh, sorry. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the best ways is to join our Bernie dialer. Again, we still have a lot of staffers here in the state of California that are running phone banks into other states. And we are running to win. And we believe that it's possible, but we do need that support.
Before we go to the questions, Sam, where'd you go? Sam Sukatan, are you still here? Do you want to should we bring him in to tell us like one story from the field?
Yeah.
Are you okay with that? Do you want to do that, Sam? Well, you have no way of responding, but Sam Favela, operator, why don't you try to bring Sam Sukatan in, and even though he wasn't prepared for this, and maybe he can tell us a story from organizing the Central Valley for Bernie Sanders.
Doing that right now.
Thank you.
We're doing this live. We're changing it up. We have someone on the call that was on the ground, and was it the Central Valley, Jane?
Inland Empire, Orange County. You had asked about Orange County.
Oh, damn. Yes, Orange County. I would love to hear one story from that. Sam, are you logging on?
I'm here. Let me just put let me just put something. Let me look a little.
Don't put a shirt on. Don't do that. Shelter me in place.
This is the nicest I have looked in 14 days.
Don't put a shirt on. Just, go. It's two kinds of. I'm gonna shut up now. While he's doing that,
I have a shirt on now. Give me a second.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, Sam. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. I was really just here to listen. Hi, Jane.
That's okay. Tell us. Look at that fancy machine you got on your head. How about that? You're ready.
Yep.
Oh, this whole thing. All right. Tell us the story from organizing for Bernie Sanders in Orange County.
Oh, woof. Okay. So I'm going to lead with, I grew up and I'm currently in the city of San Bernardino. So for those of you who are not from Southern California, Orange County and the Inland Empire have profoundly different political cultures, where the OC has been kind of ground zero for the Republican Party for the last 40 years. Right. And San Bernardino has kind of been forgotten. It's kind of very post-industrial. And so there's different kinds of work. I think the Bernie movement kind of evolved differently in those spaces. And so I actually had to set up my own HQ was in Riverside. We're actually closing it down tomorrow. We're still kind of unpacking things. And then we had an Orange County Wide office in Santana. Excuse me, Santana. My team will be really mad if they hear me say it. The cock with the cock cat. I think one story that I love is, so Sean King came down. Sean King came down to open up our Santa Ana office. He's a justice activist.
Yes.
Doing a lot of work on DA reform. And one of the things that he talked about, it was nighttime, right? It was nighttime. It was kind of a surprise. I think, Jane, you called me. She's like, yeah, we're going to have Sean King do a tour. Can you have anything? I'm like, yeah, office opening. And it was dark. It was pitch black. We put some floodlights on in the parking lot. And I think we got 500 people.
Wow, that's powerful.
And every single person that we signed in, I checked afterwards. Every single one of them did at least 3 shifts through the program. That's not my favorite, though. I do want to apologize. You asked for one story. I have another.
Okay.
So in Riverside County, some of you may know, everyone knows Coachella, right? the Coachella Valley.
Yes, so
Music
sad.
Festival.
R.I.P. this year.
I mean, it's still coming back. Hopefully in October we'll be through this, inshallah. But so we were the first presidential campaign to have a presence in Coachella since Kennedy in '61.
Wow.
The entire Coachella City Council had endorsed Senator Sanders in '16. They had been pushing a lot of work around banning private prisons and private detention centers in the city. So I reached out, and Mayor Stephen Hernandez is like, "Bro, we all endorsed Bernie already. Like, come out here." So we did a swing right before the debate. You probably saw this. We did a swing through the Coachella Valley, and we did a rally in Rancho Mirage, 81% white, one of the richest cities in Riverside County. Trump did a fundraiser there a couple months later. But right before that, we opened our office at La Casa del Trabajador, which was the Coachella Valley headquarters for Cesar Chavez and United Farm Workers.
Wow, that's amazing.
We had gotten the lease signed like Friday. We got keys Saturday. This was like supposed to be on Monday, Tuesday. We did what's called a political build. So we just like, hey, by the way, we leaked it to the press. We didn't do like the whole, some of you got our emails and our texts. We had, I don't remember crowd count, but it must have been at least 300 people.
Wow.
Again, pitch black, nobody knew anything about this, right in front of this like house in the middle, like right next to Veterans Park. And so like making sure, and Jane talked about this, like nobody had run a campaign like we had. And just
I'm gonna have to now close it out and get back to Jane for a second. But thank you so much, Sam, for the stories. Jane, I have time for about 2 questions for you, and a lot of them, the questions that folks are asking are in the same vein, which is like, beyond the dialer and beyond making phone calls, what can folks do? I think Delia is asking this question. A bunch of people have been asking this question. How beyond making phone calls, what can people do from California to help them get the candidacy? A lot of folks are asking. Is there anything else?
Well, a couple of things I'll say. One is, of course, contributing to the campaign. The second is the senator has identified roughly 26 organizations that are on the front lines of battling COVID-19 and supporting organizations that are, again, supporting the most vulnerable, ranging from, restaurant workers to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, to Unite Here's Hotel Workers Education and Support Fund, to Meals on Wheels. So I'll put in the links for folks to check out the organizations that the senator has put out there.
Awesome.
Is the Bernie dialer? Honestly, it feels hard to do, but many of us are sheltering in place, and also a lot of the folks that we're calling are sheltering in place. And we have gotten 2 types of response. There are some folks, of course, that just can't think about the presidential primary because they're being so impacted by COVID-19. And of course, be gracious and thoughtful and let those folks go. But then there have been plenty of others that have been excited to hear from someone because of the social isolation and have appreciated conversation and time to talk politically. So I do encourage people to get out there, because the best way for us to win is both to get out people that would already support Senator Sanders to actually take the next step to vote. And the second is just to answer questions to folks, people that might have, sharing your own personal story about what a President Bernie Sanders would mean for you. So those are the 2 ways that you can continue to help. Of course, putting your messaging out on social media and engaging in conversations online also helps.
Amazing. And just for folks who are tuning in, we have put the coronavirus relief funds link in the chat box. As well, we've put the link for the Bernie Sanders dialers also in the chat box. 2 quick questions, and then we're going to go. One, well, they're not so quick, but I think they're important to ask you. One, Kevin Chang wants to know, how do you think the California primary results will affect progressives running for California local elections in the future? And then there was a great question about you in particular, Jane, from Jasmine, who wanted to hear about your own journey and decision to pursue electoral politics. She's a college student, she's a big Bernie voter, and there's a lot of cynicism and frustration with electoral politics right now, evidenced by poor youth turnout. So she's kind of looking to you for inspiration. So those are the 2 final questions before we tune out.
Could you repeat the first one again? Sorry.
Yeah, it's about how you think the results of the California primary will affect progressives running for elections in California.
Okay. We do think that the increase in turnout on the March 3rd primary did support progressive candidates who had primaries of their own throughout the state. And the senators did endorse a selection of candidates that were running for state legislature and local office, and we encourage you to check those candidates out. You know, we want to make sure that, and the senator did this in 2016, that we make it clear that we don't win by just winning the White House. We win by winning school board races, city council races, and state legislatures. That is how we enact movement and social change from a policy perspective. The second question about how I got involved in electoral politics.
Yes.
You know, as a young person, I became very politically engaged and conscious, and I never ever thought I would work for a candidate, nor would I ever run for office. I was one of those activists that considered myself a purist and thought that engaging in electoral politics was dirty business with a lot of compromising and not a whole lot of positive outcomes for my community. And it was really a process, actually. First becoming a community organizer, working with youth here in San Francisco for 6 years, and thus slowly attending school board meetings and board of supervisors meetings and advocating for budgetary requests and organizing, and then seeing actually the difference that a public school teacher on the school board or a former tenant organizer on the board of supervisors was making by holding a seat. And a few years later, I decided to run as a very young person. I was 24 years old. I decided to run for school board because I didn't see enough people that looked like me and that served their community running to represent our families on the Board of Education. I lost that race, by the way. I did not win, but I came back 2 years later and I came in first place out of 15 candidates. I think a couple of things that are important to note in this time, as always, losing a battle is not losing. In fact, you cannot lose if you are willing to come back, wake up the next day, and fight again. Just inherent in the fact that you got up the next day and got back in the game, that means you didn't lose. And for all of us that are on the front line, and for all of us that are surviving on the front line, it's urgent. Like, we have to fight. No one is going to fight for us. We have to be out there, and we have to refuse to stop believing. And, you know, we talk a lot about resistance when President Trump came into office 3.5 years ago, but I really believe that it's persistence, the refusal to stop believing. That is what winning is about at the end of the day. And it's hard, it's disheartening, it's demoralizing, it's challenging. I feel scared. I question my impact on almost a daily basis. And I also know that there's nothing else I want to do every single morning when I wake up. And so this work is hard and we have a lot to do. And I see now all the different questions out there, and I'm sorry that I can't answer all of them. But it's just these small steps, they do accumulate. They really do make a difference. And the one thing I'll say that's somewhat victorious is that it allowed me to pass a revenue measure here in 2016, inspired by Senator Bernie Sanders, to make San Francisco the only city in the country to make community college tuition free for all of our residents, regardless of income, age, or any type of prerequisite. So victories do happen, and a lot of losses happen too. But we got to continue that fight. Manny, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for providing this outlet and medium during this time for us to continue to engage and build community.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. Please take this conversation and turn it into action. You can take this to Twitter. You can tag us at Welcome to Manny's. You can tag the Sanders campaign. We've put in the link, the call tool. Please also consider becoming a sponsor of Manny's so that we can keep providing this kind of programming for you. There's a link in the chat box. It's joinit.org/o/Manny's to become a sponsor or a donor to our organization. Jane, thank you so much for the time. Keep fighting, and have a good day, everyone. Thanks so much.
Manny, thank you.
Bye.